Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the Conservative Standing Tall. It is Sunday morning, and this is one of your hosts, Michael Voss, along with
John Restuccia, former president of the College Republicans at Binghamton University.
That's correct. And we are here today with a very special guest. We're very happy to be introducing Niger Innis. He is with us on the phone from Nevada, no less. Mm-hmm. And we thank you, Niger, for being here with us and having a conversation. I think it's going to be very exciting to speak with you as
my pleasure.
Yeah. I'm just at a loss for words. You've had an incredible career. And just to go over a little bit of your background for people who may not be familiar.
The few people who may not be familiar.
Yeah. Most people should be.
Yeah.
You've been on MSNBC. You've been on NPR, National Public Radio. You've been a guest on CNN, Fox News, BBC, CBC, ABC, and CBS News, as well as Al Jazeera. Essentially, you have been on pretty much every major news media station talking about conservative and Republican issues for decades now, and as well as being the national director of CORE, which is also known as the Congress of Racial Equality. You have an impressive resume, sir.
I thank you for that. Makes me feel old.
No, not at all. You're my age, actually. And John, of course, is the young one here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 20, but still, I mean, I'm going to start off with the first question here. I mean, when people say Republican, they normally think white, male, rich, upper class, and that's not you. I mean, your father was a libertarian, if I know correctly. I mean, how did you become a Republican?
Yep, you're absolutely right, and well, I think that's because a lot of times people, including Republicans, don't realize the history of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you two gentlemen know clearly, the Republican Party was started as an anti-slavery party, as a party that had a great deal of abolitionists in it. Not every Republican was necessarily an abolitionist, but every abolitionist was a Republican. Mm-hmm. And they were fighting an entrenched political party called the Democratic Party, which was the pro-slavery party at the time. And then, of course, after the Civil War was fought and blacks were freed, and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was passed to mm-hmm. give them full citizenship and voting rights, the Democratic Party, using nonviolent and very violent means, really arming what I call the military wing of the Democratic Party, also known as the Ku Klux Klan, mm-hmm. Reversed all the gains that blacks had made after the Civil War and after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, and essentially reinstituted a de facto neo-slavery throughout the South, which obviously was a terrible thing for Black Americans to have to deal with, but I would argue was a total betrayal of Abraham Lincoln, a total betrayal of the hundreds of thousands of whites and blacks that had given their lives to change America fundamentally and to rid us of the sin of slavery. That was a terrible betrayal which existed until the modern-day civil rights movement, which, of course, is when the Congress of Racial Equality, the organization I lead, was born. And eventually, blacks were, and what Colin Powell, the great general, former Secretary mm-hmm. of State, former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, called the Second Civil War, the Civil Rights Revolution, made blacks truly full citizens. And, of course, in that fight, Democrats disproportionately were against civil rights legislation, whereas the Republican Party was disproportionately for civil rights legislation. Now, fast forwarding to today, there's a new type of struggle for liberty. And it's not the struggle of liberty against the bonds of slavery or against a segregated system, but it's for the individual being able, through their own work, sweat equity, brain skills, to achieve the American dream without being encumbered by big government regulation, by big government taxation, or forced upon big government dependency. And yet again, the Democratic Party is the party pushing these constraints on the individual and individual liberty, and it is the Republican Party that in large part is promoting it. So I think it's not only appropriate that a Black American, African American be Republican, I think it's crazy for an African American not to be Republican.
I can agree with that wholeheartedly. As a Black Puerto Rican myself, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Just looking at what have been the results, what have we actually seen from the Democratic Party? Not the promises, but the reality. I have to imagine, though, you've had, I know in my experience, every time someone asks, conversations about politics come up, people ask about it, and then they suddenly go, hey, wait a minute, are you a Republican? And they have this look of amazement. Some people a look of horror. Do you get that? And if you do, how do you respond? I mean, for people who don't know who you are.
Right. I think, yes, I still do get that. I don't get it as much today as I did early in my career, and I certainly didn't get it to the same degree that my father, even though he was not a Republican, he was certainly a libertarian, and he was often allied with Republican or conservative issues. The vicious onslaught against people like him, and to this day, Justice Clarence Thomas, Walter Williams, Thomas Sowell. There's a litany, former Congressman Allen West. There's a litany of civil rights heroes. Former Ambassador Alan Keyes. These are folk who, in the old days of promoting neo-Black republicanism, received vicious attacks. Dr. Condoleezza Rice, when she was Secretary of State. Colin Powell, when he was Secretary of State. And I find it, I worship the man. He's an American institution and hero. But I'm disappointed that through the Obama years and to this day, he's aligned himself with some of the very progressive forces that used to call him Uncle Tom, Porch Monkey, and all types of vicious names. And that is a progressive tactic. I'm sure you all are familiar with the book Saul Lewinsky, Rules for Radicals. And they've just taken their plays out of that playbook, which is to just totally not discredit the argument, not discredit the philosophy or the ideology of Black republicanism, but to just discredit its existence. Therefore, you shouldn't even have a platform to speak. And that viciousness that had been visited on Black conservatives and Black Republicans throughout my entire lifetime is now being visited on all conservatives and Republicans. As you know, I am scheduled, I think, at some point in the future to come to your campus and to speak. But, you just had a visitor at your campus who's not Black, but he is a conservative and a white conservative, economist, I believe, and he was booed down. He was not even given the opportunity to give his point of view. And that is something that Black conservatives and Black Republicans have been forced to deal with for decades.
Now, Niger, I do want to address, because it's something that a lot of people think may be happening in the past. You've just recently, I believe, and I was looking this up when I was doing some research on you, Aurelia Skipwith, who has now been confirmed, finally, as the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. But for some time, she was being held up from her appointment because she was a President Trump nominee, a black woman. And even as KBUL News Talk noted in their article, you were one of the defenders of her out in, I think it was Montana.
Absolutely.
And it just goes to show that we had to fight in 2019 to get a qualified, exceptional woman into a vote. I mean, the vote was 52-39. They barely got it through. And as you had said in that article, it seemed the only thing that stopped it was, well, she's black, she's a conservative under President Trump, and that's stopping her. And that's terrifying to me that still exists.
Yeah, and the thing is, Donald Trump is the first. I mean, it's so ironic. I mean, I'm originally I live in Nevada now, but I'm originally from New York, and I've known of Donald Trump for decades. I've met him a couple of times over the years in New York, and for most of his political career, he was a Democrat. And it's ironic that it took Donald Trump, who spent all of his career or most of his political career being a Democrat and supporting liberal causes, to actually fulfill the Republican mission in ways that no Republican has since the days of Ronald Reagan. And more than that, because as bad as it was for Reagan, I mean, the left wing was just as vicious to Ronald Reagan as they are today, but were not nearly as aggressive and not nearly as uniformly hostile to the President of the United States as they are today, and actively so. But the difference here, and for the first time, I think, ever, for a Republican at the presidential level, you've got a guy that is fighting back hard, that if you bring a knife to the fight, he's going to bring a gun. If you bring a gun, he's going to use a bazooka. And that is unfortunately, in this ideological struggle that we're with this progressive element, that is the only way to defeat them. And so I'm very, very, very proud that Ms. Allworth has the opportunity to serve. She is overly qualified for the position, and her story is the American story. It is a true Horatio Alger American success story. So I'm so proud that I had the opportunity to support her and promote her, and I'm so proud that she is going to be elevated to that position. I think head of Fish and Wildlife in the cabinet.
Yes. Let's us jump. I know. I'm very excited. It's Niger here. I don't get a chance to talk to a lot of black Republicans on a national level. So, but go ahead.
Yes, I kind of had a question here. I mean, clearly you know the history of the Democratic Party very well. You know your history. You know your information. A lot of the times on college campuses, it seems, there has been a drastic shift in the Democratic platform with progressives. Do you think that the progressive movement is just going farther and farther to the left, or do you think they've always been like this?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Your audio is failing. I mean, I believe your question was about progressives versus Democrats.
No, it was more so, do you see a change in the Democratic Party as a whole to progressives, or have they always been like this, do you think?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. And what has changed in the Democratic Party? There was a time that you had legitimate moderates, even some conservative Democrats. In fact, Ronald Reagan would not have been nearly as successful because he faced a Democratic Congress. Mm-hmm. But the difference is that the Democratic Party of the 1970s, the 1980s, and all through until the 1990s had a legitimate moderate to conservative constituency. within the Democratic Party. So while the progressives have been around the Democratic Party since Woodrow Wilson, and some might even argue even before then, but the progressive and racist element within the Democrat Party has been around, for more than 100 years. They still had conservative elements within it. But it seems now you have two elements within the Democrat Party today. You have the radical AOC, the squad types, progressives, and then you have cowards. Because Joe Biden, even though he's a lot more left-wing than he would lead on, Joe Biden, even as a so-called moderate, Amy Klobuchar as a so-called moderate, Pete Buttigieg as a so-called moderate, they're intimidated by the far left. And so even if they do not share their political far left-wing neo-communist point of view, they're intimidated by them. And they follow like they're soldiers in Stalin's army. So that is the nature of today's Democratic Party. In addition to the ideology of the far left, they also have the tactics of old-fashioned anarchists and violent people that don't want to have a discussion, don't want to have an intellectual exchange of ideas, but would much prefer that you either cave in to their nonsense and believe what they believe and spout what they spout, or that they're going to physically attempt to harm you and do so. And that is, unfortunately, the makeup of today's Democrat Party. That's why this election is so important for those of us that are sane and sensible and are not a part of the extreme. Even if you are not a conservative Republican that believes in conservative republicanism, there's no way on earth that you want to put in power some of the types that would promote the ideologies and agendas of people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib.
Actually, that brings up a great question. And let me ask you, we've seen on college campuses over and over again the violent, radical fight against conservatives whenever conservatives come out because they believe in socialism, democratic socialism or communism. And we see that that in Hong Kong, where people are actually living this, they're rejecting the socialism. At the same time, we've seen, like at Binghamton University, where 200 of these progressive socialists have attacked a small group of 3. And they try and push back and tell conservatives, if you're a black conservative, if you're a Republican, a libertarian, to hide, to not speak up. As someone who has fought that battle yourself and has gotten national acclaim, who's run for Congress, what would you say to those black students, those Hispanics, and everyone else on a college campus when they face that? I know
your audio's
it's
a little
the connection.
challenged, but I think I understand the question. That the two groups that are most under assault by this far left group, far left progressives, are traditional allies in the civil rights movement, and those two groups are blacks and Jews. And in my organization, we have our own patron saints. And, they're patron saints not only of the Congress of Racial Equality, but quite frankly, they're patron saints of the entire civil rights movement. And that is Scherner, Cheney, and Goodman, the 3 Congress of Racial Equality workers that were registering blacks to vote in Mississippi in 1964 and were murdered by the Klan. These boys, 2 Jews from New York and 1 black from Mississippi, became a rallying cry upon which the entire civil rights movement rallied. And I think there needs to be a new alliance of blacks and Jews and others to give liberty to those that want to express a different point of view than what is supposed to be expected of them. You know, if you are a woman, you're supposed to be far left wing. If you are black, you're supposed to be far left wing. If you're Hispanic, you're supposed to be far left wing. If you are gay, you're supposed to be far left wing. And if you are not, you are considered a traitor to your creed, which is absurd and anti-American.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I know there's some difficulties with our audio right now. I apologize for that. Been trying to tweak the system as we keep going, so I do appreciate that. Let me ask you, in 2020, whether it's a congressional race like the New York 22nd District here, which is one of the top 3 races, projected to be one of the top 3 races in the nation, or in the Nevada 4th, or anywhere else in the nation, for students of color, people of color, that what would you say are the biggest issues that we need to be aware of, to ask candidates about, and how would you suggest people of color, whether on a college campus or otherwise, get involved?
Well, I'd say that just to be active is a good thing, even if you're active, I think, for the wrong cause, which I think big government liberalism and socialism is. To be active and to be young is a good thing. It's healthy. You learn about the principles of our republic. Hopefully, you'll learn to cherish our Constitution. And so those are all good things, and I would encourage activism. For those that have a different point of view and tend to be either moderate or conservatives and people of color, I would say have no fear. As bad as the progressives are and trying to intimidate you and trying to cower you into towing the line and being one of them, you are not facing what your ancestors who had to overcome slavery, who had to overcome segregation, who had to overcome discrimination, had to overcome not being able to vote, Those were real substantial challenges, and you should take heart and tap into that courage of a generation's past to overcome the intellectual tyranny of the far left. Now, in terms of the politics of the day, the great Speaker of the House, Democrat Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, wrote a book and always said all politics are local. So I'm a little bit hesitant to give a national prescription to those that might be fighting in local races. But having said that, I'll do it, and since you asked. And what I would say is that our country is at a tipping point. We are in the midst of an economic renaissance, of an American renaissance. I mean, there was a time just a few short years ago that people were saying that America's best days are behind us, that there's a new norm when it comes to economic growth, that there's going to be a permanent, 1% or 1.5% growth. The far left wing was essentially saying that we need to get you through health care, through all types of other things, get you addicted to the dependency of government because the private sector has no solutions for you. Well, that was just a few short years ago. And through the election of Donald J. Trump, there's an economic renaissance, and hope, true hope, is back on track. And you have record low unemployment. You've got rising wages. You've got more jobs out there than you have Americans to fill those jobs. And that is a healthy thing, and we've got to keep that momentum going. We have to keep the momentum of promoting jobs, and not just jobs, but small business development. But one of the fastest growing small businesses are in the Hispanic and African American female communities. Those are the fastest growing businesses. And what we have to do, and what I would say any politician would want to do, is promote that free market economy that is the envy of the world, and that is prevented us from becoming a socialist state like Venezuela.
Let me ask you something, Niger, because we both grew up in New York City in the 70s. We're the same age. You were in Harlem. I was in the Bronx. And I can tell in my lifetime, we often hear kids, the younger students, the young generation, say that there's so much racism, that there's so many microaggressions, and that they can't move forward. And I look at it as I've seen the progress we've made, that we've been able to get to this point, to have people who can become like Dr. Ben Carson, and to get into the cabinet, to run for president, to run for Congress like you have, like I have. And I think it's important, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's important for us to say, don't fall into the trap of the media saying you're a victim. I think victimhood is really being sold to people of color and students in general. And to tell them, no, you can succeed, because we have been succeeding, but we need to give up on this idea of victimhood and move forward. And we have successes, and we will continue to have them. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The most dangerous, what I've called neo-slavery, because it's worse than slavery in some sense, or worse than the classic neo-slavery of segregation, because in those circumstances, you had a monster, you had an enemy that was oppressing you. And the neo-slavery of victimization, the person oppressing you is the person you see in the mirror, because you believe that there is oppression or racism under every carpet and around every corner, and it paralyzes you. It prevents you from maximizing the opportunities that other people will see. I mean, there's a reason that the entire world would want to emigrate to the United States of America. And that neo-victimization or neo-slavery of victimization paralyzes individuals that won the birthright lottery of being born in the United States in 2020. And that is a very dangerous, insidious agenda that the progressives want to promote. And it is very unhealthy, and it is something that I've fought for many, many years and will continue to do so. Unfortunately, gentlemen, I've got to ask you for one last question, and then I've got to wrap up. No, but it's been a pleasure being on with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No, we were looking at the time as well, and we realized we were just about there as well. I was about to mention that. I would say this. I know that we've had you scheduled to come out to Binghamton. You are going to join me and John on the discussion about socialism, against socialism. We look forward to seeing you in 2020 in Binghamton, New York. What words of inspiration might you give as someone who's on national TV, someone who is making the fight on a national as well as local level? What inspiration can you give to these students as they're being challenged by socialists, by progressives, until we can see you in person?
Contrary to the far left wing and the so-called progressives, it is the greatest time to be alive on the planet Earth. There is a higher standard of living. The life expectancy for human beings today is a heck of a lot better than it was 100 years ago, than it was 200 years ago or 300 years ago. That the technological advancements, the things that you have at your fingertips. I mean, just to use the example of the smartphone. The smartphone has more technology and more opportunity to do things than the Pentagon had in the 1950s. The Pentagon computers had in the 1950s. And this has been made available to the consumer, to rank and file human beings, because of the success of the capitalist system, because of the success of and the ingenuity, largely but not exclusively, of the American people. And so if you won the birthright lottery of being born, or you won the immigration lottery of coming to the country legally and becoming a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident with legal status, then you should see the world as your oyster, and the opportunities abound. Our sky is to the limit. I am not a pessimist, optimist, and that is part of the American creed. As long as we have a faith in our Constitution, which was created by flawed men, but was divinely inspired, I would say, by God. As long as we have faith in our Constitution, in our Bill of Rights, and in our capitalist system, then the sky's the limit on what you can achieve in the greatest of countries in the history of mankind, the United States of America.
I think those are wonderful words of inspiration. And Niger Innis, I thank you for being on this program, and I apologize for the technical issues. John?
Thank you so much for being on the podcast and standing up for conservatism as a whole.
It's my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully in early 2020, and I look forward to meeting your students and to the people of upstate New York.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we're going to be sending out a little Christmas gift to you shortly. Keep an eye out for it. It's one of our exclusive flash drives, and we'll be sending that out to you. It's a 4 gigabyte flash drive, but it's an exclusive, and we'll send that out to you. But I do thank you. Go ahead.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
You're very
much
welcome.
again.
Thank you, Niger. And so that was Niger Innis. I want to thank him for having been on the program. We, of course, are very excited about this. Here at Conservatives Standing Tall, we've been doing fantastic work. And
before we go, Michael, no, he hung up.
Okay.
Before we go, Michael, you have loved ones, don't you?
I have what?
You have loved ones this Christmas, don't you?
Of course I do.
Well, Michael, what more of a perfect gift to get them this season than the exclusive Michael Vasquez No Soundbites Allowed flash drive? Now, Michael, how can people get this extraordinary gift for their loved ones this year? Can you let us know?
Yeah, okay. Shameless as it is. Yeah, so you can, anyone who makes a donation of $10 or more to our GoFundMe, we would be sending out, just let us know your address. We'll send out a $10, a flash drive. It is the exclusive No Soundbites Allowed card-sized flash drive. It's 4 gigabytes. It's something that you can use for, if you want to have spreadsheets on there, music, audio, podcasts.
Our show you could put on there as well.
Put that on there, yeah. It's anything that you want.
It's very versatile. It fits in your wallet. It's high quality. It's fantastic, and it's only with a $10 donation.
Yeah.
Perfect time of year. I know I'll be donating to give them out as Christmas gifts this year.
That's true. You already have, and
yes.
I know that. And of course, they come with no. There is no for shipping. There is no cost for shipping. Just let us know your address. We'll ship it out to you. But to return to speaking about Niger Innis, and I know, folks, that at the very beginning of it, there was a little bit of difficulty with some of the internet channels that we are speaking to right now live. We apologize for that. We know there was a little bit of an audio issue. It seems really interesting that every time the issue comes up about talking about a black conservative, the internet just goes berserk. Somehow the signal gets weak. Somehow it's difficult to make calls or to connect to the internet. But I do appreciate the fact that we were able to speak with Niger Innis, to have someone of his stature, a former member of Congress, the head of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, an individual who shows up on national news media and who is coming to the Binghamton area to speak at Binghamton University, to spend time with us a half hour here today talking about issues that I think don't get spoken about enough.
No, absolutely. You're definitely right. I mean, this was a fantastic interview. You had, we both had questions and prepared and everything. And he was, I mean, you don't know this. He said 15-minute interview, and we went 37 minutes to 40 minutes. So, we doubled the time. I mean, I'm sure he enjoyed himself and had a fantastic time as well. So,
once you get talking, especially. He's from New York. I'm from New York. We're the same age. We've had similar experiences. He ran for Congress. I did. I can't wait to meet him in person, either at CPAC. I think I missed him at CPAC 2019. Oof. I look forward to seeing him in 2020 to talk in person, or more importantly, when he comes to Binghamton University.
Absolutely.
To have that conversation.
And we'll be setting that up.
Yep. I think this will be incredible.
I think it will too.
But we're also looking forward to seeing your questions, folks. Now that the call's over, you can always call us or text us at 607-242-1582 and let us know what you think. You can like and share this. You can let us know your comments on Facebook, on YouTube. We look at all the comments. We try to respond to all the comments and let you know what's going on and just get feedback. And we have... Who's coming up later? By the way, we have. You haven't seen all the work. We've been working really hard over these holidays, and we have several guests that you haven't seen yet that we've recorded already that are coming out. We have upcoming is Judicial Watch, Michael Benexhaw. Oh God, he's going to kill me now because I got it right in the interview.
Yes, you got it.
I'm getting it wrong now. But one of the senior lawyer for Judicial Watch. We have also coming up
today Ben Garrison, the famous cartoonist. You've definitely seen his work. He's all over social media. I believe the president has shared his cartoons before. Mm-hmm. Done commissions for some of the biggest names in the conservative movement. He just released a new cartoon even today. Self-described libertarian. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. And one final thought I want to leave everyone with, and we thank you for checking out the show, and we do hope you share it, is we want to mention a real big shout out to one of our co-hosts here who happens to currently be in Florida with the president and has spoken publicly last night with the president. President Trump introduced her to the stage, and I was speaking with her, and she had a wonderful little speech there. Lacey.
Yeah, you've probably seen her. You've probably seen her on the show. She's called in more than once. She's still in Florida. She met with Dan Crenshaw. She met with Dave Rubin, Charlie Kirk, and most importantly, she got introduced by the president. Gave a 30-second, fantastic, powerful speech to the audience. Broadcasted on national television. It was fantastic. I can't say, I'm seeing her over New Year's as well. I'm going to Jersey to visit her family and everything because her mom is probably listening as well right now.
She's a fantastic fan of the show.
Yes, as you should be. As everyone should be a fantastic fan of the show. Yes. But you know what, and she invited me over and everything like that for New Year's, but I can't say how great of a job she did. It was
incredible.
No, it was fantastic. And I mean, this wouldn't have been done without the work of the people like you who are listening and sharing out our story, because like I said before, Binghamton University was going to be swept under the rug if it wasn't for people like you sharing the story, getting it out there, sharing the podcast, and just helping out as much as you can. And I mean, we have some legal updates coming soon, so as well, I will be
Harvey Stenger, be aware, this is not over.
No.
The attacks on the conservatives, of which one was Lacey herself, as well as many others that were there, the insult to the First Amendment, the attacks by plot, these are not issues that are going away. We have not forgotten that. And
there will be more updates as soon as the semester starts. It's a little quiet right now, which is why we have so many guests coming on for content. Michael was like, get me as many guests as you can for Thursday, and I ended up overbooking him apparently.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yep. He was not expecting that very fast. But, I mean, it's a good thing to be overbooked sometimes. I feel like, especially with your show, but
Never a bad thing.
never a bad thing.
We get the content out there. We get the interviews out there every time as soon as they come. But with that, we got to prepare for our next interview, which we'll be seeing very soon, folks. So until then, we do, again, want to thank our guest today, Innis, for having been on the show. We want to thank you for having checked it out and let us know your comments. And Lacey, you're doing a great job. And we're going to be back with you very shortly with even more national figures talking about the issues that matter to you all, especially conservatives, especially students in college, because you're not alone. We're all out here, and we have a very big voice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael, I'm your co-host, so I can't say thank you anymore for having me on. But like I said, remember to donate to get one of the exclusive Michael Vasquez No Soundbites Allowed flash drives, and we will see you next time.
All right, folks. Thank you.